Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Tangent TV. My name is Joseph Lanzalata, and today I am lucky enough to have with me the one and only Philip Coffey. Thanks for coming on, Philip.
Thanks very much, Joe.
Now, a senior HR professional with over 15 years private, public, multinational consultancy and IBEC advisory experience, Philip brings a wealth of experience in the fields of strategic HR, mentoring, coaching, and career development. He has led the design and delivery of mentoring, career development, and coaching programs across a wide range of organizations across the private and public sectors, which has positively impacted on thousands of professionals across Ireland. As part of the mentoring and career development programs, Philip has delivered training to over 500 mentors and mentees over the last 5 years. He also lectured on an ILM accredited master's in coaching and mentoring in the UK. Philip also has extensive experience of supporting professionals through executive and career coaching across every major industry sector. He has multiple awards, and for that reason and the amazing intro, Philip, I am so grateful to have you on today to be able to talk about kind of the power of networking, the power of mentors, and how we can potentially use LinkedIn to leverage that. So thanks again for coming on.
Great, thanks for that intro. Follow that up now.
Amazing. Yeah, no, now we just have to deliver on it. So here, anyway, I'm so happy to have you. And I can always give you an intro. I can kind of, talk about a bit of what I know, but in terms of today, right? So you are now a executive career and life coach. Maybe you could start out by telling everybody a little bit of what that is and kind of a bit of your story. So how you came to be an executive career and life coach.
Yeah, I suppose from my particular perspective with it, back in university times, I was always interested in human resources. And even from then, sort of going back 15, 16 years ago, coaching and mentoring would have been the two areas that stood out most. And funny enough, when I started my career, it was more the employee relations and the other standard things you think about human resources in terms of recruitment and learning development that I would have focused on, but not really specifically coaching, mentoring. But then kind of coincidentally enough, doing this with Tangent and with Trinity, I suppose around the sort of 8 years ago mark, would have got more heavily involved in the coaching mentoring side and really seen the benefits, specifically in large organization like that, where coaching mentoring came at the right time, similar to maybe now, just true or close to possibly economic sort of issues, but people still wanting their careers to be developed and feel like they're going forward with things, and the world doesn't stop in terms of that. And I really saw huge benefits practical benefits coming from coaching and mentoring in organizations then.
Okay, so that's how you ended up where you are now. As we get into it, and I want to bring as much value to kind of our listeners today. There's one thing I've seen you speak before. I've seen you come into Trinity and speak before, and one of the things that you had shared that really kind of hit home for me and framed in the context of people who are job searching and trying to develop their careers is how hiring decisions kind of really happen and how that kind of frames out. Because I know a lot of us look at, okay, I need to get my CV together and apply for something, but can you share with us a bit as to kind of how that happens in the broader context?
Yeah, I suppose one of the things that just we will be...
Apologies, Philip. I'm just going to cut you back off because I realized that I had muted my microphone and now I'm back on. So people would have just seen my lips moving, but they didn't hear the last question. So now I'm going to just ask it again and frame it. But essentially, for anybody who didn't hear that there, I'm just asking about kind of, you've spoken before in Trinity, and I've seen you speak before in Trinity and share some really good insights into how hiring kind of really happens. It's not always the straightforward hand in your CV sort of process. So if you can just share with us kind of the broader framework of how hiring kind of really comes together.
Yeah, I suppose everybody's always out there obviously looking to expand their career, and they know it from their particular perspective. I guess the straightest answer, the most value we're going to give for people here is just to really emphasize the power of networking. Whether you're in a public or private sector situation, it's maybe more common place in the private sector, and you'll have situations where people network so well with a particular industry or company or with people in roles that they end up over time growing to such a stage with it that they get referrals in for interviews in that company itself, or maybe through the individual you've been networking with may know people in their wider network. So let's take marketing or finance or accounting or anything like that. No matter what it is, really, people want to, I suppose, work with people that they can trust, and that is a hugely powerful piece. Now, in a lot of organizations, obviously, as well, they value that, getting kind of internal referrals, but they want to widen their scope as well, so they'll go external also. And really, at the end of the day, generally, organizations just want the right person. I know people will have situations where they feel they got burnt and really think they should have been the top person, top guy or top woman for that role, and are a bit miffed at the end of it in terms of why they didn't get it. But I think you have to look upon it in terms of being targeted yourself and utilizing your network to be intentional about where you want to go. Yes, you might get burnt along the way, but the way I can look at that is if they didn't really value the person, then it wasn't really going to be a match made in heaven, so it wasn't really for you. Now, we're not going to solve the whole recruitment market all in one go. Like, it's clearly broken because people send in, there's hundreds of CVs going in for roles. You have systems like automatic tracking systems kind of filtering people out. It's very dehumanized, but the rehumanizing of it, essentially, for people, they can take control of it, is to network heavily in the area of interest that they have and take that kind of risk out of the equation. So I wouldn't say don't go the route of online jobs boards or recruitment agencies. It's just you have to have a wide spread in your career search and your job search, and don't leave all your eggs in one basket. And at the moment, I think too many people only rely on the online jobs boards or the recruitment agencies, and that's what leads to a huge amount of frustration.
Absolutely. And this is what, like, that's kind of what was shocking for me when I first heard it, but actually makes so much sense, that kind of the job application process can almost be flipped on its head. It's the idea of, like, everybody goes the standard route because it's what everybody knows, but in reality, it kind of tends to run the opposite way. So it really does come down to your ability to have that personal network, or at least tap into your personal network and be a bit more targeted. Now, because I know you have knowledge in the space, I'd love to hear a bit more kind of like detailed tactically. If I'm somebody who hears this and goes, right, okay, I need to tap into my personal network, what might be some kind of practical steps or ways that somebody can start to tap into their personal network?
Yeah, like I think the first part in terms of the tactics is really knowing ourselves. That's crucial, and it saves so many weeks and months. Like, if you think of, like, my end goal is I want to get a job in X company, often when that question gets asked to somebody, they don't really know the answer straight off. And I suppose that's the bit where you need to go back and research and go, okay, industry wise, companies wise, or role wise, what do I like most? Where do I think I might fit? And yes, you could probably do many things okay or pretty good, but what can you do really well? What are you excellent at? What's the one or two roles that you kind of feel you've an excellent fit for? If you completely don't know, you probably do need to do that initial trial of finding roles and ruling things in and out by looking at job descriptions and talking to people in those roles, getting a good sense of what they're about. So the first bit, as I say, is really knowing yourself and what you want. Right down to getting the pen and paper out, or if people want to do it on a computer, and typing this up for yourself and kind of mapping out your steps in terms of what you're reeling in and reeling out. And then having some form of tracing all this for yourself. So if you are going to be reaching out to people, get organized with an Excel sheet, have a list of companies you want to reach out to, names of people. LinkedIn is excellent for being able to get to people so quickly. And then there's a combination, I suppose, of reaching out and conversing with people on LinkedIn, but also maybe going a step further and crafting emails directly to people, because while people are on LinkedIn, they may not be active every day, but we are looking at our work email 9 to 5. And really the tactics are about, making it first about the person. And it's a bit like growing something at home. Like the kids would growing kind of vegetables, whatever, or you have your lovely garden. You do need to water it, so you need to give it a bit of care and attention. And same with networking, you kind of have to, the phrases, and some of these are cliches, but they're true, is you have to tap your well before you actually need to drink the water. And unfortunately, people sometimes come slow to the party, and it's harder for them, but it can still be recovered even if you haven't really been doing that. But my point would be, if you really want to roll the next 1, 2, 3 months, you need to be kind of starting now to build up your network with a view that you will get referrals at the end of it. It won't happen by just saying, hi, you're in marketing, I'd like a job with your company, because people get scared away from that. They think they're put under pressure. Whereas if you pick something that they're good at, that they've said about themselves on LinkedIn, go with a kind of a small crafted message to them about that, and ask to have a chat with them about those areas they've done well in, or their organization's done well in, and want to learn from them. That's a really proper way to build a network for effective networking conversations. And then if people see where you're coming from, learn a bit about you, then they've banked that memory in their head and go, okay, that's somebody, I know where they're going. And if they can see opportunities down the road, and you keep in touch with them kind of bit by bit over the coming weeks, then you're in the line of sight if something comes up. And that's really the the nuts and bolts of it, that is a bit of work, that has effort that has to go into that, but it's positive effort. Whereas if you think of just sitting at home and sending out 10 or 15 applications per day, a week could go by, you could have 100 applications out and get 1 or 2 responses. Whereas if you spoke to 30 or 40 people, the chances are you'll get 10 or 15 leads for something, probably distill down into 5 or 10 interviews, and then you only need one job out of those interviews. So it's just a way better hit rate of the networking route. It's not to dismiss effective approaches with recruiters or online jobs boards. It's just to work with the methods that can kind of work best.
Mm. I love the idea because it's kind of like taking the responsibility of finding the job into your own hands, in the sense that you might be able to build your relationships in those networks. And I'm so glad you went into LinkedIn, because I've heard from so many people I've spoken to, it's like LinkedIn is often thought of as kind of like, okay, that's my CV, but online. And it's so much more than that. It can be used as a tool to be able to reach people. On the other end, you have the kind of like, people can be a bit spammy on LinkedIn. I've seen it before where you get a message or that's clearly copied and pasted. So I know, as you said, like tailoring can be hugely important, and kind of fitting that into how you reach out to the right people and tailoring your messages. I know you've spoken about before the idea of like the career path, and kind of you're laying out your career path, and your career path is going to be something that you're aiming towards. If you don't have the aim, you might not be able to get there. How does that career pathing kind of overlap with the idea of who you might be reaching out to in those networks on LinkedIn, and kind of how you might tailor those reaching out questions, if that makes sense?
Yeah, like I think the first thing is like people just, yeah, they don't want to be kind of hassled, if you want to call that. There's a subtlety to it. So yeah, there's an element of a bit of pre-planning here to make sure that how would that land. Generally, it's just I don't think people should overcomplicate it though. If it's about finding something that people already talk about themselves on LinkedIn, or engaging with posts that the person has put up. So you build a bit of rapport and familiarity. So it can feel a little bit like it's being methodical, and you're targeting people, but it's for a positive way. It's you're trying to network. That's what LinkedIn is there for. If it's, as long as you're keeping it professional, it's perfectly fine. And I think the thing there is like, if you post up some material about maybe tangent or innovation, and people have an interest in that, getting into that field or transitioning from one area to another, they need to start commenting maybe on some of your posts and coming up visible in your kind of field of vision first, and then maybe approach with a more of an ask, in terms of a direct ask to have a chat about some element that you're good at. Or they could even reference these series of, you notice the series that you're currently doing and how valuable that's been. And then you're much more likely to have a chat with them, because they've actually taken the time to just do that little bit of checking in about what you're good at. Now, people have to have a thick skin as well, because you may want to approach these people, and you may not hear back from some people, but it's not personal ever, I believe, unless you've really kind of not got the right frame in terms of what you said and maybe offended them. But that's really unlikely. It's more of a case that people are just, they see the message, they want to get back to you, but at the moment, I suppose everyone's flat out trying to do the home life as well as the work life. But the good thing I've seen is that people are more and more willing to create that little bit of time for the quick chats with people, and that does develop into a rapport, and in time, as I say, growing it to a level of someone goes, yeah, I know where I could help that person, or if I don't, I know people in my network who could. So that's sort of it. If people put that legwork in, it pays off in spades.
I love that. And I've seen it a lot for myself personally, and for a lot of people, both in and outside of the kind of innovation entrepreneurship space. As somebody's developing even startups and ideas, it's the same thing applied either to your career life or to your startup life, that you need to build these relationships. Even if you're looking for like investment, you're not going to, you're not going to marry an investor on the first meeting. You're going to build a relationship there. And then there might be that trust that brings that down the line. And I love that. But, and this is a huge thing that kind of brings us into the topic of mentors and mentoring, and how one might go about establishing that. Because there's one thing for kind of like building the connections in the companies that you might be looking to do to get information that can get you towards that interview. But ultimately, when you're looking for that more bigger picture, I know you yourself are a life coach, which is so much bigger than just a career. If people are looking to kind of establish those mentors and find those mentors, those people who might give them kind of guidance in life towards both their career and kind of how they're going to frame what they work towards, how they have these conversations that aren't necessarily leading towards a job, but just to build their networks and who they relate with. Can you share a bit about how to establish those mentors, and even a bit on maybe how your experience with being a mentor or being a mentee has been?
Yeah, certainly. Like, I suppose the easiest answer in terms of it is, without kind of making it harder for people, is thinking within their own network initially who they've come across that they'd really highly rate. So that could be somebody who's more established and has had 3 or 4 roles, but came across previous colleagues in other positions, other roles that they were in, other organizations. You can easily find them again on LinkedIn, even if you haven't been chatting to them in the last while. And then it's about having a good think before you actually make the reach out about what do you want to be mentored on. Is it something specific around the career in the industry that you're some area you don't really know about, but you feel they have a good sense of it? Or is it something about them, like that you want a role model in terms of, I know some people who are just unbelievable in terms of how they influence others, or whether that be in the written word or through like different talks, or how they might come across in meetings, and their gravitas and how they carry themselves is just uber professional. And they can get through the stickiest of things, can get money essentially out of other people, or maybe not in the sense of, it's not robbing a bank, but you do need to kind of influence at a top level to get the things you want for your particular business area, for example. And some people can be a bull in a china shop, but that you might get away with it once, but you won't have a long-lasting relationship. So the people I've seen who've done that really well just have a brilliant way of carrying themselves, and how they craft their message, and how they kind of think about the other person, but impact them in a really positive way. So it can be something as more detailed as that if you're a more senior professional, or it could be a situation where somebody's a little bit newer into the marketplace, into their role, and presenting but scare the hell out of them. But they know somebody who's pretty good at it, maybe does online webinars. There's someone who's put themselves out there, wants to talk about that particular thing. It could be relationships as well in the office, or how to get along with people, or how they may manage their team and that kind of stuff. So whatever it is for the particular person, they need to have a good think about it, and then need to kind of maybe think about reaching out to the person with an initial chat about it first to see if they'd be up for it, and then not plan it out too much if it's done that way, but just see how it goes. That's one option. And another option is within an organization. Like organizations are getting more in tune that mentoring and coaching programs can be hugely valuable. And mentoring is particularly effective in terms of the cost to benefit ratio is fantastic, because you don't have to pay an outside provider necessarily to have a huge amount of spend in terms of coaching. You do have to get proper kind of levels of training up for mentors and mentees. So there is an initial sort of spend, but if you get a swathe of what we would have done in Trinity, for example, and other organizations, hundreds of mentors, after a while, that becomes a mutually reinforcing circle year on year. So it's a great system to have in place. And for organizations themselves, strategically, that's what people want. They want to be developed in their organization. That's why they leave. If they feel it's gone stagnant or stale, or that there's no progression. So, more and more organizations are cottoning on to this fact that we really need to see this as strategic.
I love that as the high level view of it, even like can permeate through an organization, like wherever you are, you can have that. I know there are other people who would be potentially sitting like me at home who would hear this great advice, and then they'd get to LinkedIn, they'd get to their keyboard, and they'd see the person who they might be looking to talk to, and then get really anxious because they don't know just what to say. Would you be able to potentially give like a very short kind of example of how, if you were reaching out to someone who you looked to as a mentor, or somebody who you looked to as a potential mentor for you, what you might say in that first initial message? Say you didn't quite know them very well, you may have seen them before, but if you're looking for mentorship, how might someone start that conversation?
Yeah, I suppose the very first point will be that if people are trying to connect with people and they don't know them already and haven't been connected, they need to personalize their message a little bit, just the initial connection request. So just the 3 little buttons close to somebody's name, and instead of pressing connect directly, if people click into the 3 little buttons on LinkedIn and go into personalize the message, it's a way better chance they're going to connect with you, because if they get a short note with it, that's going to stand you out from the crowd, because most people just click to connect. And in a way, LinkedIn kind of has set off that what's in a way a little bit kind of rude or bad behavior, because they want to get connections going from the start. So when you sign up with LinkedIn, it kind of feeds off your email addresses and tries to ping out suggestions to you to connect. And obviously everyone just wants to start building their profile. But you know, if you will stand out from the crowd if you have a short little note with your connection requests, because a lot of people just won't bother connecting with you if you don't kind of give any sort of context to why. So that's a very just basic one that sometimes can be missed by people. But then after that, it's about finding a little bit of research in terms of what they're saying about themselves in either their about section or some post that stands out recently, and literally just strike them while they are in thought. Maybe they've done something recently that stood out or had a good success. For example, there in the HR field, there's been people who've won awards recently, and one or two would particularly stand out for me because there are areas that in a HR sense that are really interested in pursuing some initiatives in terms of that. So, you know, my mantra would be trying to learn from the best, you know, learn from people who have the best practice going. And, you know, it's kind of a compliment to people if you've checked up something that they're good at and want to have a quick chat with them about it. So it's about keeping it really short and sweet. You may have to follow up, and I think 4 or 5 days later could be a good time frame to follow up if they haven't responded to the first message. Again, keeping it polite and professional, keeping it easy that they can come back to you when they're free. But at the same time, you know, they will get the message that they're kind of in demand, so to speak, and you'll be back in their mind. And most people will be good with that. If they aren't, well, I wouldn't take it personally. There's plenty of others in the field. No matter what the field is, you don't have to rely on just one person. There's many others that are good in the field, and you move on to people who are willing to help.
Absolutely. That's amazing. And how somebody might start that kind of conversation is so important, because then once you're down the road and you're having that conversation, you've developed a mentor-mentee relationship, you have something to go on. If you can touch briefly for us, just before we kind of go on and wrap up with a few kind of final tips and things, if somebody's looking to be on the other side of it, say they've developed themselves in their field, they have an area of expertise, a domain knowledge that they know might be valuable to kind of the next generation of people or even people their own age, how can someone go about kind of establishing themselves as a mentor? Is it as simple as just calling yourself a mentor, or is there a bit of a process there?
Yeah, I think there's two easy routes are offering yourself up through like an intermediary, like your HR division in an organization. So you could offer yourself up that way, go and look if anyone was ever looking for this, or you think it might be a good solution, even if they don't have a formal program, just, you know, through a HR business partnering, for example, through that conduit, someone could offer themselves up to be that resource. A second thing would be through any of their networks that they have. So through alumni, for example, if you're in Trinity, for example, they have an excellent alumni mentoring program, and a lot of the universities do. So most, you know, there's quite a lot of people have come through that sort of route. So, and then it's just through other things you might be active in. Maybe you're not as active with alumni stuff, but you are in, for example, there's change management networks, there's project management networks. And I think it's about just being subtle and keeping it real, because you do have to be mindful of, like, if you're having a coffee with someone, I know it's harder now when we're not out meeting people in physical spaces at the moment, but you can put yourself out there in terms of when you do connect with people on LinkedIn, for example. Look, I have knowledge on X, Y, and Z. I see you have started off in the project management space or the HR space. If ever you want to touch base on questions, just come to me. You know, you don't have to say I'm going to be your mentor, but you're putting yourself out there for questions, and then that may develop into something with people where they keep coming back and want that kind of help. So those would be kind of obvious sort of routes that people go out there. I don't think they need to broadcast it in such a way as being, hey, look at me. I think it can just come up very real and natural with people who you think you might be able to lend a hand to. And look, if they don't want to take you up at that time, that's also part of mentoring, is kind of understanding where people are at the particular time. Maybe they'd love that, but like the conversation we had at the start, they could be a little bit tentative of, oh, I don't know what to say to this person. I don't want to look silly in front of someone who's 10 or 15 years more experience. So you might have to leave it sit with people. And then when they feel ready and they trust you, or they see some of the things you do on LinkedIn and go, oh, that guy or that lady's pretty solid, you know, they might come back to you. So, you know, I think the other thing is finding time, carving time out, and don't do it just to get it on your CV or anything. Do it for the right intentions. Like, are you genuinely trying to help somebody, or are you doing it, you know, for other reasons, which, you know, everyone knows the difference, and they'll know if you don't really care or if you do care. So, you know, I think when the right intentions are there, the people will kind of almost fall into place for you.
Absolutely. That's amazing. It parallels so closely for me with like kind of how we develop an idea in kind of a startup. It's like, if you're developing an idea, you need to make sure you're solving a real problem for real people. So it's that sort of thing as well. The idea that even if you feel you have this domain knowledge, it still comes down to, do people have a need for that? And that's just putting out the feelers and being a part of the conversation, which I guess can be so important in that way.
Yeah. And on that sort of theme, like whether it be entrepreneurship more specifically, or whether it be more general business, like I came across a phrase recently, a quote recently from someone who really struck me, and it's resonated around, true leadership is helping elevate others. And I think that stands true at any time, definitely more so now than ever because of the situation we've just been in. Because if you've got 10 or 15 years experience under your belt, or people longer, it doesn't matter. Actually, you can actually be a mentor with small amount of experience, and it can be reverse mentoring as well. That's the other thing. People who are only just coming out of secondary school or university, they could be excellent mentors in a different way, because they could teach you a lot about the tech, for example, the tech that goes into running these webinars. For example, there's a lot of people who are 5, 10, 15, 20 years that would scare the hell out of them. Whereas, those people who are more experienced might be able to tell or talk through with a more junior person a lot of the tricks of the trade of working in organizations. But getting back to that sort of point, I do think mentoring fits in our times now more than ever, because just think, when you think about things big purpose wise, why are we here? We're all here to grow and to learn in different ways. Mentoring certainly for me fits within that, and it can be just so mutually beneficial. And one thing I would say is, from talking to people at different levels, whether it be in organizations or maybe just coming through master's programs or undergraduates, the thing that would strike me is that the sort of generation coming up now, it's been really impressive how they've dealt with the last 3 months. Whereas you might have seen the jokes on LinkedIn a year or two ago where millennials and how they might handle themselves and run away from things or something like that. Not been the case what I've seen at all. I've been seeing people really being resilient and not complaining. It has been difficult for them, but being really kind of toughened up by it. And hopefully, they'll get a stage now or later in the year to be able to kind of recognize that and draw a breath. But that's one thing that's really struck me is kind of when you do mentor people, you widen your own horizons and really understand how other people are thinking. So where I take that into my career is I would work in HR as well. And it helps me with other people who will report into me, because if I'm understanding a wider span of people and mentoring them, it gets very personal in terms of what they might bring up. It again opens your eyes when you're managing other people, going, oh, maybe the things my mentee is thinking of, the colleagues who are in work could be thinking of those things. Have I stopped to ask them that? So it kind of becomes mutually beneficial for your own organization as well, if you're out there learning from what's going on in other settings.
The learning goes all around in that way.
Yeah.
It's amazing. I know for myself in mentoring, even early stage entrepreneurship, I get almost just as much out of it as I can give into it. It's a mutual learning experience, and that's the ecosystems that we all want to exist in. So Philip, I have so many questions for you. I know that you could talk for probably hours about this stuff because it's what you live and what you breathe. But I think the best thing we could do right now, kind of as we wrap it up, is just, can you give us kind of the top takeaways for people who might be on a job search? This whole series is about kind of personal branding and building yourself and building your personal brand. And often that comes down, especially in today's times, to going out and finding that job, finding your career. If somebody's on a job search right now, what would be your top tips or top takeaways for them to take away from this video?
Yeah, and I think now when it's a particularly kind of more trying market, like there will be some areas which you would have thought, in January, I'll definitely get a job in that sector, but the rug could have been pulled from under you. But there will still be other sectors, and it does mean pivoting a little bit. So I'll just bear that in mind, that, a big overarching thing here would be, don't get drawn into any negativity, because, you don't want to get kind of your eyes taken away from the prize. So a big thing I would say at the very start is getting your own kind of intentions clear. Even if the sector that you feel you want to get into is kind of on a low point at the moment because of the economic situation, you can still make a lot of growth and kind of good moves in that sort of direction. So I think being clear about that, but then assessing the market in that, like, would you have to do something where it might be an internship, whereas you might have thought it would be in a bit more of an established role? Could you do a short internship because you really want to get into that field? Or what are you going to do? Maybe go to a side type role, and then in a year or two's time, when things are a bit better, you pivot back into the real area you wanted to get into, for example. So it's just bearing that sort of thing in mind in terms of what your actual eyes on the prize. Sometimes you might have to make little stepstone moves across the pond to get to where you want to. You can't just leap over. So like you might have pre-COVID, it could have been a quicker path. So just that's something to really reflect on. Is like not forgetting where your actual end goal is. A big part of it again is the confidence side. It's the confidence piece. So it's not really an Irish thing to do, and you wouldn't be broadcasting it maybe to too many people, but people you would trust. you could be bouncing some of this off your best friends or people you would trust from a professional point of view. Like having a brag list, like what are you known for? What did you do really well in university? What have you done over the last 4 or 5 years? To get your goals out for the last number of years. Where did you really achieve? What do you really like? What are you really good at? So putting that down on the page can really actually help reinforce some of the things you might say about yourself there. You might look at your CV and go, I don't actually say that on my CV or my LinkedIn, or I know so much about X, but I never talk about it on LinkedIn. So how would anyone know you're knowledgeable about it? So there's a big element as well of like people are a little bit afraid of putting themselves out there because we're more watched now than ever with Facebook and LinkedIn and everything. People feeling a bit afraid of how they're judged, but most people are just in their own lane. They're in their own bubble. They don't really want it. It's not out of spite. They don't really want to get involved too much, but you have to for your own path and ignore anybody who would take you down, because that's just kind of silly by them. But there's way more people, like if you put things out, there's 99% of people are going to be positive and supporting you. Don't let any 1% stop you from getting what you want or putting yourself out there. I put that there as an important thing. And then it's just all the real fundamentals, like your networking piece, your career documents, like really properly preparing for interviews is a big takeaway. I would say I don't think people give enough time to it. So they kind of probably go in, hope, they're glad that they obviously got shortlisted for interview. They wing it a little bit with their CV rather than taking a really intentional approach and going, what will be asked in this interview? And do I have really strong answers to show I can solve the problems in that job description? If you've taken that extra bit of time to do that, they're the 10% of people who are getting the calls for interviews and then obviously hopefully nailing the interview. So, but that's a hugely important thing. People, need to hammer it home. If that's where your strong points are, you need to make sure they're come across crystal clear in an interview. It's the resilience piece, like I alluded to earlier on. And this piece as well, I would sort of say in terms of like, what do you really want out of the next job? So if you're kind of aligning that up in terms of what you're trying to get into, what do you think you're really going to deliver? And that kind of helps you put in some sort of plan when you get into a role that you're going to grow each year. So one thing I'd really have as a mantra is like, don't have 5 years that repeat one year after the other where you haven't really stretched or done much extra for yourself, because if you end up then 5 years down the road doing that, you'll be overpassed by somebody else who stretched themselves a little bit each year to do the basics of their job plus add other things that would push them into a higher field. So for example, at the stage I'm at, a big area of kind of focus at the moment is around kind of governance, for example. That's become more pertinent in the economy, definitely since the economic crash. It's an added field, and from that perspective, I try to push myself then to get into that kind of realm a little bit more, to get out of my comfort zone, because I know it's going to be an area, if I develop my career further, that will only grow and grow, and I don't want to be kind of saying in the marketplace for roles or in the marketplace for other opportunities and having a piece like that missing. So what is that for you? Like what are the bits that are potentially missing, and then use this time now to kind of work on them. And then it's just to make a bit of fun about it as well. It's like, what's the wider life goal here? Like, we work, we want to work, but we want to play as well. So for me, the things I'm really pining for or missing through the lockdown is the meeting up with people, maybe going for a pint with my friends or football matches and stuff like that, but also travel and things like that. So I think if you have a big career goal, what's going to be the reward at the end of it? Are you going to take a lovely holiday with your wife and your kids, for example? In my zone, my world, and for other people, what would it be? Because I think if you have something like that, that can really spur you on, because you don't want to be just doing this like a robot. It has to be for something bigger. Like, are you helping people in some way? Are you really meeting some goals for yourself, or are you going to get some sort of particular reward for yourself at the end of it? I think if you have that sort of in line, that really keeps you focused. It's like the sports person, they want the cup at the end of the year. There has to be that kind of goal. And if you have that kind of goal, then you keep almost remind yourself of that. And it really spurs you on. I find if you keep pulling that out of the locker, that brag list, for example, when you've had sort of tricky times, and boost yourself back up again, it can really kind of reinforce you and sustain you for the long run.
That's really powerful, Philip. Thank you so much for all of your insights. This has been so powerful. You've given me a lot to think about as I'm going to take away from this, so I'm sure our viewers have gotten a lot out of it. thank you so much for coming on, firstly. And I hope that everybody can take the time to digest the information that they've taken in today. And if they're interested, I know that you had given me your LinkedIn. I have that in the link of the description of this video. So if anybody does want to reach out to Philip, he's just there. He's very active on LinkedIn. I saw his post earlier today. Do reach out. But Philip, thank you so much for coming on
Thanks very
today.
much. Really a pleasure. And yeah, certainly if anybody has any question, can help in any way, just please reach out. Glad to help.
Amazing. Cool. Thanks so much, everybody, for tuning in to another episode of Tangent TV. I will look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thanks again, Philip.